Hey,
Hello.
Stacy. Hello,
Hello, hello.
hello. Ladies.
I'm going to make some coffee.
So, Stace,
Yes.
today is actually family weekend at my daughter's university. So they have a number of family-oriented events like tours and talks and that sort of thing. So I won't be staying past the 2 hour mark today,
Yes.
but I will be staying until the 2 hour mark, most likely.
Cool.
Einer, how are you?
I have to leave too after the 2 hour mark. Oh, sorry.
No, 1 hour.
Oh,
Is it eine Stunde or eine Stunde?
Eine Stunde. It depends on if the hour is female or the S, the neutral subject. And die Stunde means it's female, and so it's eine Stunde.
Eine Stunde.
Yes.
That was decades ago. I had to learn any of that. One time when I was visiting, what city was I in? I think I was in Heidelberg or Frankfurt. I actually had a 30-minute conversation with someone in Germany in German, broken German, but German. That was the height of my German speaking career. And while I'm checking in, I spent the entire night listening to Chopin piano pieces.
Wow. And I have nocturnes.
I've done nocturnes many hundreds of times, but this time I opened it up to just everything Chopin wrote, about 300 different compositions. Didn't get through them all, but it's not just nocturnes.
so is your sleep different?
I love Chopin. He's one of my favorite composers of all time. I mean, that guy knows the piano like nobody else knows the piano.
Did he only write for the piano?
I think so. I mean, he wrote some chamber pieces and concerti that involved other instruments, but it was always piano-centric, I think.
Yeah.
But his piano concerto, the slow movement, oh man, so beautiful.
So it was really a serious question. Was your sleep more restful?
I feel that it was. I don't mind having that kind of music or Eric Satie or other very like Debussy. Oh, Debussy is again also amazing. But
Let me guess, you don't like Yanni.
I do not listen to Yanni.
Good guess, huh?
That's theater.
Yeah, it is. He's a performer.
Right.
I like Yanni.
You know how I got introduced to Yanni? ABC used to do a middle of the night newscast way back in, I think, in the 90s. And their theme music was one of the pieces by Yanni. And I finally said, what is this theme music for this ABC middle of the night news? And it turned out to be Yanni.
No, all I said was I don't listen to Yanni, but I understand that he is, appealing to others.
Oh, I didn't go off camera because you disagreed with my like of Yanni. I had to turn on the fan.
It is warm today. It's almost, well, it's 70 outside, but it's almost 80 inside already.
Really?
Yeah. Of course, there's a lot of computers.
No AC?
Well, first of all, I'm upstairs where the AC doesn't work. And second of all, there's like 2 or 3 computers turned on in this room at the moment and 2 monitors. So.
And those old computers can generate lots of BTUs.
This room is always about 10 degrees warmer than the outside if there's no AC or fans are running.
Let me tell you, while we're waiting for other people to get here, I'm going to tell you a story that happened in 1986, I think, or 84, something like that. Okay. I was a very young engineer at a company that was supposed to be very high tech. So I was able, for some reason, to bring in the very first Sun 2 from Sun Microsystems. Okay. And it was a box probably about 3 feet tall, maybe 1 foot wide, and maybe about 3 feet deep. And it had lots of boards in it. So it generated lots of heat. So it was one of these machines which required more air conditioning than a standard typical office would have. So it took a special request to get special air conditioning into my office so that that machine wouldn't drive the temperature up to 90s. Okay. But then as we expanded, there was this guy who was basically 4 years in the US Navy as a lieutenant, a colonel, or something like that. No, he was a lieutenant. I think he probably ended up being 04 or something, maybe in 03. Okay. So anyway, he was brought into the company, and the company thought that a technology guy and a domain expert, should work together very closely to actually generate good ideas. So they put us in the same office. He was from North Carolina, where it's quite warm in the South, right? So he's used to daily temperatures being in the 80s, and 90s doesn't really bother him. I was in, this office that was chilled so that this computer would be operating at its good efficiency. And I liked keeping the office right about 66 because that's where I'm comfortable. Okay. I even had my, just a regular shirt at 66. So when he came into my office, I was sitting here, the computer was right there, and he was put in the other corner, kitty corner from me, where the air conditioning was coming straight down. And he was sniffling. He was just uncomfortable. He was wearing 2 or 3 layers of sweaters. He was cursing me under his breath until I said, "Are you cold?" And I offered to switch. So after we switched, we ended up being good friends. We ended up actually building literally many tens of millions of dollars of business for that company. He ended up being one of my very, in fact, I probably call him my very best friend right now. And he was the best man at my wedding. And so he and I maintained touch ever since then. And that's like 35 years since 1986, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that was how that friendship started. Was because he was stuck under special air conditioning while I had this brand new, very hot Sun Microsystems workstation. Anyway, I was just biding the time while people were gathering, but it doesn't look like we're going to get more. We got Colin, we got Tease, Joshua, Heiner, Stacy, Barry, and myself. Okay. All right. So while I've got the floor, I'm going to say this weekend is my daughter's school's family weekend. So they've got a number of different events, every 2 hours, they got something for family and visiting parents and siblings or whatever. And I can't go all day because the dogs are here, so I can't leave them alone all day, but I'm going to probably go for 1 or 2 sessions. So I'm going to depart right at the 2-hour mark, but I will stay up until the 2-hour mark. And then you guys can go as long as you guys like. So with that, I'll open it up to anybody else who wants to personally check in. Over. Hey, Colin, I do notice that last session I attended with you, you didn't say word 1. So I was kind of curious, but welcome. Anyone else want to check in?
Yeah, no, I think I've said everything I need to say 3 times. Now I'm listening till something new happens.
Speaking of listening, they spent an hour, I think it was yesterday, on one of the morning hour-long talk shows on public radio, On Point. They spent a whole hour with experts talking about the art of listening. And also, if you guys know the chief scientist of Google, whose name is escaping me at the moment, his sister lives here in Boston, and she posted something also yesterday from a different source about listening. So it turns out that there's some new material out on the importance and the power and the techniques of listening for those who are interested in what it means to be a good listener.
I don't know his title, but you wouldn't be talking about Peter Norvig, would you?
Yes, Peter Norvig, that's the guy's name. And his sister, I think it's Laura Norvig is the sister. So she posted an item about the art of listening, which is not technically connected to the guests that they had on Point. And so I said, well, oddly enough, they spent an hour talking about the same thing that very same day. And so there's a little bit of sort of stuff about the importance of being a good listener. And the thing that Laura Norvig said is that she calls it radical listening, the thing that she picked up on. And radical listening, you just listen. You don't say a word. You don't respond. You just be a listener.
Since you brought up the Norvigs, I have two little stories about Peter while we're biding the time, if you're curious. All right, without objection, I'm going to tell two stories about Peter. I'm probably one of the ignominious few people in the entire world who has offered Peter Norvig a job and been turned down. He was fresh out of his PhD at Stanford, and I got his resume for some reason. I thought, this looks like a good guy. So we brought him in, obviously liked him, made him an offer, but then he eventually went to an e-commerce company doing online catalogs before he got to Google. And when he got his Google offer, and this is something that was a story that he told me years later, he actually called me up and said, hey, I got this offer from Google. Is it a reasonable offer? Because at that time I was a company co-founder. I was actually, running a small little team, and I was from Stanford. He was from Stanford. He talked to me. So I said, okay, so what are the terms of the offer? And he told me the terms of the offer. And at that time, Google was on its rise, but it was nowhere near the success it is today. And I said, well, for a typical startup and for somebody your seniority and with your credibility and your, stage in the company, like he was going to be one of the first few engineers. I said, this looks low. You should double that, and see what they say. So he doubled that, and they didn't argue. They just gave it to him. So years later, in 2008, he attended a conference, Program for the Future. It was either 2008 or 2010. He told me that story. I didn't actually know until then because I met him way back in the mid-90s. And he said, I took your advice. And he told me that story. And he said, I owe you. So I never actually said how much he owes me, but he just said, I owe you. So I thought that was an interesting thing for him to say, and interesting acknowledgement for him to give. Yeah. So anyway, he's way more successful, but, he got attached to Google, and maybe that's why I should have gotten a PhD, but I don't have a PhD.
You know that he announced last week that he's joining Stanford's Human-Centered AI Institute as an education fellow, retaining his connection with Google, but now I think he's going to spend more time at Stanford.
Yep, makes sense. Yep. Yeah, Barry, I don't know if you know him, but he's written lots of stuff. He's written lots of papers, some of them very widely quoted. And so he's actually quite a personality in the compute centers.
Yeah, I've seen the videos that, they have those Google seminars that end up on YouTube, and I've seen him host some of those seminars. And he's a Facebook friend of mine, as is his sister, but I don't know him personally. In
fact, he ended up coming to probably most, if not all, of my 4 or 5 Program for the Future conferences that went from 2008 all the way to 2015. In fact, he was the person who allowed us to use a Google facility back in 2013. He was the one who enabled that. So that was very nice of Peter. Okay, I'm done telling stories. Anybody else with check-ins, or shall we let it go, or shall I run through my list of seed topics? Barry, Heiners.
We were promised 2 stories.
Oh,
yes, you had a second story.
The first story was that I'm one of the few people that actually, was turned down, made him an offer and got turned down. The second was him telling me about the advice that he asked me for and that I gave him. Okay, so those are the 2 stories. Those are the 2. Yeah. That's my brush with Peter Norvig fame.
He's a smart guy. And he also pioneered that YouTube course, actually the Stanford course on AI.
Oh, yes. Him and I think Sebastian, or is it somebody else?
Sebastian, what's Sebastian's last name?
Brunn?
Say it again.
Was it Sebastian Brunn?
Brunn, yeah, Brunn. So the 2 of them co-taught this online course. It was the same course
for free.
Teaching in person. Yes.
For free.
Well,
everybody.
For free if you only audited. If you wanted to get a certificate, then you had to pay a little extra. But what the thing was is that it was very widely watched. I think 30,000 people or something. And a lot of the people on the internet scored better than the students in class, in fact, quite a bit better. Mm-hmm. And as a result, Sebastian went off and started a whole company to do online education.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty big thing. And I did audit that course. And I didn't do very well on the homework. So homework was a bit over my head. Even Bayesian inference, which I theoretically should know how to do, I was stumbling over doing Bayesian inference.
It's one thing to know the theory. It's the other to actually, be familiar with the code that actually implements the theory.
Well, it was actually taking specific examples and plugging them into the formula. And I somehow or other just couldn't plug them in correctly, even though I knew what I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
I couldn't execute it.
All right. Kayla, are you here to say hello and check in?
Not much of a check-in, just doing work and listening.
Okay, a plug for Kayla. Everybody go check out TahitiVC.com. That's Kayla's new website with her new workshop and dance classes. TahitiVC.com. Go take classes. The first one's free, I saw on the website.
Yeah, but it's only for girls.
What?
Women, I'm sorry, I don't understand yet.
That didn't come across on the website. I didn't see that.
Oh, I know, huh? I should put a disclaimer. But yeah, I've been really busy with that and my FEMA thing. But today I'm taking 3 13-year-old boys to Universal Studios for their Halloween Horror Nights. Originally, they wanted to go together, or alone without me. But I'm like, no, you're gonna want to your mom or someone's mom there. So I've got that going on, and I don't know. My days and my weekends are full. So
what's your outfit gonna be for that party?
Well, I can't. You don't dress up at Universal Studios. I think they don't want the monsters to get mixed up. The monsters come and scare you and come at you, and yeah, they do. They come from the corners and then they like rah, and scare you. But the thing is, if you don't act scared, if you try to take a selfie with them, then they'll leave you alone. So the last time I tried to take selfies with the monsters, they got upset. But next weekend, I will be dressing up.
Okay.
So maybe you'll see me in costume again, maybe not. But that's my check-in. Nothing but
Thank you. All right. Anyone else? Going once. Twice.
Well, I'll say something.
Yeah, Stacy.
I'm only saying it because I'm just curious what the reaction is. But so my Facebook friends are probably the most mixed in terms of socioeconomic levels, education, everything. And I feel if I were to ask, I feel like half of them, okay, I'm just discovering that half the people on Facebook are here for business, whether it's to promote a website or whatnot. The other half of the people are not there for that, or at least weren't when they started. And I was thinking that if I were to say this on my page, half the people would say, that's not true. And the other half would say, duh. So I'm assuming that you guys are the duh people.
You mean about promoting a business?
That's why most of the people spend time here, has something to do with their professional lives.
Yeah.
To you guys, that would be obvious. Not
and when they give up on Facebook, they go over to LinkedIn and do it even better. A lot of people are migrating off of Facebook and over to LinkedIn because they're really interested in promoting their career.
But that's my point, because LinkedIn, everybody knows, is for professional reasons.
Right.
Yeah. Uh-oh. I've got an 18-pound cat between me and the screen.
We can see you. We can.
So there's the cat's butt.
There's a big cat.
Yeah. He ate my chicken curry rice last night.
Really? Spicy?
Oh, yeah. He just dug his face right into the curry sauce over rice, and he just stayed there for like 10 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. So he likes my food. Anyway, Alex, we're doing check-ins, and if no one has anything else to say, then you'll be victim to my list of seed topics.
Okay. Well, I haven't got anything to check in with. I just was interested to see who's here and what the topic is. I'll go with whatever's on the table.
Well, okay. Anybody else? Going once? Eins. Zwei. Drei. Hey, I thought that Stacy's post was interesting because it clearly seemed like Stacy was interested in using this as a topic. Stacy's post is one that reads, and there was a lot of stuff basically crossed out on it, but it says, members agree that we are here to forward progress towards something. While constructive criticism is indispensable, this is not a place for outright opposition to something. Offenders will be expelled, and somebody has been expelled. So this is probably from some other group. And Stacy writes, I'd like to have an open conversation regarding what, if anything, should happen in the gray area. So Stacy, I picked up on your interest in this topic. How would you like to elaborate on that topic?
So just to make it clear that I wasn't questioning the fact that the person was expelled, but I was questioning what steps should take place before that happens and who should be responsible for taking those steps, because there was a lot of good conversation generated, like, we don't have time to be doing all that. So I understand that, but at the same time, you're not going to create equality or you're not gonna create a space that feels safe for new ideas if you just throw people out without some sort of trial. And I'm using that loosely.
Due process.
Due process.
Some sort of process, yeah.
Yeah,
this goes back to our early days of GCC also, where yes, someone was expelled, and we're still not at the bottom of that particular issue. So thanks for bringing that up. So that's proposal number one. I was actually viewing, okay, here's idea number two and possibly others. I was reviewing another video, from 2018. It was one where Tammy and Alex and myself and somebody else were in it. And in that particular video, we had actually proposed to write a little bit of science fiction together. This is probably one of the earliest forms of co-visioning. We're going to try to write this description or a little set of vignettes about the world we'd like to create, co-create, the world we'd like to live in. So I go back to my actually systems engineering days, where one aspect of system engineering is to write science fiction. I love this aspect of systems engineering, okay? In other words, you write this thing called a concept of operations or an operations concept. It's basically, if we were done with whatever we wanted to do and the world were a different place, how would you describe the day in the life of someone, whether it's me, whether it's you, whether it's, a 6-year-old, whether it's a retiree, whether it's, a leader someplace, whether it's a, food service worker? How would you describe the world that person lives in if we were done building what we wanted to build? That's, in a sense, a science fiction story or a collection of vignettes. So we started a document, and we actually called it a concept of operations. And I'm going to paste the link in here because it's not very long, but we got a start in it, but we didn't establish much momentum in it. But it clearly was one early form of co-visioning. Now, whether or not you like that particular form or what, I'm just saying we were trying to do that in this particular video and its aftermath. So I just thought I'd share that because this notion of making sense and co-visioning and all these other things I call pillars were taking shape. And the co-visioning thing was taking shape as we were discussing this concept of operations idea. So that's idea number 2, is whether we wanted to bring back some sort of co-visioning exercise and what kind of artifact we might want to create if we wanted to do that. Idea number 3, and I'll share that here also, is I think now 2 years ago, we did a survey and I summarized the results of the survey about what people think were relevant topics to GCC. And I summarized it and presented it, I think, no less than twice, separated by several months. And I was wondering if that still applied. So I'm going to put the link in here again. This is a very long, ugly link because it's a Facebook link. I wonder if it does the proper redirection because I was too lazy to actually put a shorter link in there.
You can just chop everything after the question mark. You don't need that.
It's about the foundational memes in GCC.
Exactly, right. And some of you may remember the survey that preceded it. Actually, who was here back then? Who was here in, let's say, second half of 2019? Most of you, I would guess, other than maybe Kayla.
And me. I've only been here a year.
Really, Barry?
Well, I mean, technically, I think I signed on earlier than that, but I didn't really participate until about a year ago.
Okay. So anyway, I just came across this reference and wanted to see if periodically we might want to see if looking at those questions again might put some context around some of our conversations. And so that was my idea number 3. So before I go on to others, I'll shut up and see if that generates any reaction.
Alex has his hand up.
I saw the last comment entry on that page was 1 year ago. So it's not getting any traffic, or it looks like it's not getting any visitors.
Which page are you talking about, Alex?
The link you put in there, Facebook Global Challenges collaboration. The one with the long extension after the question mark.
Yes, I don't expect there to be much interaction because that's just the nature of the way Facebook presents posts. It always gets a short, lifetime of reaction and then recedes into the background because we don't have topic threading. Yeah, 36 weeks ago, I think there was some reaction.
Yes, exactly 36 weeks.
Nothing since.
GrunchNet by Kirby Erner, who I'd never heard of, was the last.
If we sensationalize the algorithm,
sorry, go ahead, Al.
The algorithm, Facebook algorithm would push our content to the top if we create sensationalized things that people click on.
Right, and we got 4 years of that stuff, Alex. So which one are we going to sensationalize?
The ones that make everybody angry, according to Facebook.
We need to if we're discussing ivermectin and Mark Zuckerberg and rights and trust and freedoms, that will invite people's interest. I've noticed that.
Yeah, are we turning into BuzzFeed? I just want to log out now if we're going to turn into BuzzFeed. That's what they did, is just grab old content, re-sensationalized it, called it BuzzFeed, and then they made millions of dollars. If we're turning into that, I want to log out now.
Oh, I didn't know that's how
BuzzFeed. Free to log out whenever you want, Josh.
That's interesting. I didn't know that's how BuzzFeed started. I'm curious if Barry, since he was in community building studies, if we're an intentional community, and if we are, what's the list of criteria that we kind of got to match for the type of community that we are?
Yeah, yes. I thought, because of the name of the group, I thought it was an intentional community. So when I went to find out what are the elements that define GCC as an intentional community, I didn't find them. And that kind of astonished me, because I thought that I would find, a nice little social contract and the whole, rigmarole, and it wasn't there. And then these discussions that I've been in for the past year sort of confirmed that people were coming in with their own kind of personal hobby horses, and it wasn't any one agreed upon objective, or one agreed upon value, or at least a small set of them that everybody was collaborating towards. And that kind of puzzled me, how this turned out not to be an intentional community the way I had imagined it was going to be.
Yep. But you probably found various different individual presentations of what individuals thought GCC were.
Yeah.
Because I know that I've offered mine.
Right.
And others have offered theirs.
Right. People came in with their own little hobby horses, a little bit like the Ed Sullivan show. Each
not just hobby horses, though, but attempts to try and create something that summarizes what happens here. I would say that the presentation that I just shared, for example, that's not my personal hobby horse. I got a bunch of other hobby horses that are not even referenced there.
But it's kind of a variety show, like the old-fashioned Ed Sullivan variety show. So every act sort of comes on, and it doesn't necessarily make a continuous story. Each act is sort of standalone from the previous act, and so there's no continuing storyline. Or people are each contributing a piece to the same big puzzle. And that just turned out to be the way it is. And, efforts to make it coherent just never really congealed.
That was my assessment too. Not 100% variety show, but it has a variety show element to it. But there is some threads, and I think it is the hobby horses. So
they dominated. I mean, there were certain topics that people kept returning to that were recurring themes, but they weren't the main theme. They were just little recurring sidebars.
Stacy, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I had a co-creation idea in line with what you put up about 2018. I didn't necessarily think that this group would be interested in it, though. But the point of the mission was it would have been research oriented, and people would have been able to go and get the research they wanted. It was a fictitious culture war between the businesses, between the marijuana industry and the mushroom industry. And I purposely picked that because I thought first of all, people have interest in all of those things. So certain people could be gathering research and bringing it together. But it's not the same dichotomy as you see in politics. And what I wanted to do was find something where people could agree on more than they disagree. And then they'd be able to look at the business implications without being, they would be able to be more objective when looking behind the scenes to see what's really happening with big business. So again, maybe one or two people from here would be interested, maybe a couple of people in different groups, but I never actually was motivated to do that. But I love the idea of writing, and I do like the idea of creative storytelling, not necessarily creating your future world, because the problem is we don't know how to get there. We know what we want, we don't know how to get there. So I think we have to look at where we are and start writing to change that in order to get there.
Okay, so Alice, you've got your hand up, but then I'm going to put my hand up because I just got triggered.
In a bad way?
Oh, we'll see. You'll see.
There's a part of the algorithm, the keywords. And if the word collaboration and trust were uppermost in that list of keywords in the algorithm, that would change the way search engines optimize their content to the people they're delivering it to. So collaboration and cooperation and global challenges are the keywords that we need to have uppermost. And if we have an algorithm we can push onto Facebook to change their ways, they might decide to incorporate this suggestion. Over.
Vote with your feet.
Josh just did.
So, am I next?
Oh, Josh
Yes.
did disconnect.
Okay, so I'm going to reference several people's names because I'm going to talk about something that has to do with where are we, where do we want to go, and how do we get there, okay? So I know that there are a lot of ways to think about this. To me, those look like three of the questions that Kayla brings up in Talanoa conversations. In business, when Tom Siebel described it, he called this gap analysis. Where we are, where we want to go, what's the gap, okay? So if we take a look at how people think, okay, especially people who want to create something, there's always an end consequent or result. There's a current state that is different from the end result. And there's always something describing either a process or a set of steps or a set of actions or a set of constructions that hopefully get us to a theoretical end state, right? So when people say time means nothing, this is what puzzles me, because clearly in order to take steps and clearly to take action, there's some sequence that has to take place. Otherwise, everything happens at the same time. So unless you've got this notion of time, you don't know this serialization of steps. Maybe I'm getting a little bit too triggered, but this is why I really don't understand when people say be present. Does being present mean you can't think about the past state? Does it mean you cannot think about the future desired state? I really don't understand that statement, okay? So to me, any change anyone wants to make in anything deals with a current state, an end state, and some actions that you believe are going to lead you to that end state. To me, this is like fundamental in taking action, in making decisions. So I say I'm triggered because this is a question I just don't understand when people use these terms like be present, time means nothing, leave everything at the door, meaning, okay, so I can't think about where we are, I can't think about where we're trying to go. I have trouble with such literal sayings that are not more nuanced, shall I say. So I have trouble collaborating with people who use that kind of framing. And that's why I say I'm triggered and wanted to describe my reaction to that kind of statement. So I'm actually saying I agree a lot with what you just said, Stacy. I agree with those questions that Caleb brought up in Talanoa Dialogues, okay? But I don't understand how that fits into a model where you can't talk about time, you can't, bring in things to the room, you can't think about the future, you can't think about the past. That's what I don't understand. Over.
Excuse me, Alex, can I just ask Sam, thank you. What made you bring that up?
Because you brought up something that I understand as gap analysis. I understand whatever you want to call it, okay? In order to effect change, there's descriptions of known state or present state. There's descriptions of desired state. And then there's steps you want to take in order to get to that desired state. And that's what I really think barn raising has been trying to get across as an understanding or as an approach. That's why I bring up Kayla's name as well.
But staying in the present, you would have just asked me a question about what I said.
Why would I say I'm trying to stay in the present? I said specifically.
I understand that. I understand that, but that's when you should have stayed in the present instead of going on this long thing that I have no idea.
Okay, so now I'm being shoulded. I'm being should on right now.
You are.
Yes.
What I would have liked, or what I think would have been more positive, is if instead of going into the past and figuring out all the things you're angry at, if you would have just said whatever your point is. My point is, if not everybody understands, for example, I'm going to use the example of the culture wars that I said between my fictitious thing with the mushroom people versus the marijuana.
Wait, do you think I'm disagreeing with you?
Yes.
I am not disagreeing with you.
But
you're reacting very strongly thinking that I'm disagreeing with you.
Yes, I am. Because you started the conversation by saying, I'm triggered. And then you went on to this.
I am not disagreeing with you, Stacy.
So what I'm suggesting is, instead of saying why you're triggered that has to do with things in the past, start from where you are now.
I did.
Just move forward. I didn't get it that way.
Yeah, I see that.
What I want to hear Alex.
Well, Alex has had his hand up for a while, though.
Yeah, well, this thing about time is not confusing to me. Time and space are the same thing, according to the theory that Barry can help us out with. The theory of relativity, or the new theory of relativity of space and time. But it's the thing about human interaction with the sphere of time is our individual personal way of dealing with our daily activities in the moment. Being in the moment, as Eckhart Tolle wrote in The Power of Now, is about focusing on what's happening around you and within your sphere of influence, especially during the moment of now. The day, for me, being a recovered alcoholic, one day is a moment. Each day is a moment of time in my life. So today, if I do things that are just for today, I'm focusing on the moment, really. I'm not looking ahead at tomorrow or in the past. If I've got 1 foot in tomorrow and 1 foot in yesterday, I'm fishing on today. So I focus on the moment. That way I get clarity in my life and the ability to focus with some degree of accuracy, because it's my life and I'm the one who has to deal with the repercussions of the good and the bad that's happening in my life and the way I interact with others who come in and out of my life. And that's the way I collaborate with them, everyone else in the world on a daily basis. If I do have to project something that is in the distance, like months ahead or years ahead, then I'm projecting. There's nothing wrong with projecting. It's just that it takes me away from the focus of what's happening today. So I can do that. I can use a portion of my now to look at a projected future, as a science fiction writer would do. And I can use that as well as a tool. There's lots of tools in the toolbox, and some of them are not as sharp as others. So I have to get them all out now and again and oil them and sharpen them and put them back in their place. Over.
Kayla, you disappeared, but your hand was up next.
You're muted.
Yeah.
Okay, I apologize. I've been so rude. I've been kind of listening and kind of not listening, and then I heard my name being called, and then I heard Talanoa, and then I heard my name being called again. So I'm really sorry. And then I heard, I don't understand this being in the present moment, because clearly I am not in the present moment, and I will be the example of why and I can tell you guys why, although I don't know if you guys care. So, what question did you guys have for me?
Well, you have your hand up.
Question. I withdraw the question because I wanted your opinion of what was going on. But
oh, okay. And yeah, I'll try to concentrate more. Okay, go, Sam.
Okay. From what Stacy shared and what Alex shared, I feel that people did not hear what I was saying. And so I'm curious whether any of you actually did hear and understand what I was saying. Whether anyone here did. Because if not, then I am a very poor communicator.
Well, I understand gap analysis.
Tease
has his hand up.
No, I don't understand, but if you talk about present moment and so on, many thought process goes in my mind, not answering your question, but thinking about my experience. So I'm not able to respond because the thoughts go in my head on that subject, but not towards you, but to my own experience. So I cannot add to answering what you are trying to tell.
I did notice you like threw your head back when I said that. So I was wondering what was going through your head. So let me ask, Barry, you said you understood gap analysis. Did what I say not make sense, or did it actually make sense?
Not only does it make sense, I wrote an article, a think piece about what you're talking about. Oh, must have been 30 years ago. It's an article that I entitled The Calculus of Ideas, where the calculus of ideas is about how to construct the key steps to devise a plan to reach a goal from the present state. So that's exactly what you were talking about. You called it gap analysis. I didn't use that term.
No, I say there's many terms, one of which is gap analysis.
Yeah.
Another is blah, blah, blah. There's probably many, many, many terms.
So yeah, I've thought about that. I've written up stuff about it. And, you know, if you think of a movie, you take one frame of a movie, one single frame, that's the present moment at that moment, but it tells you nothing about how you got there or where it's going. You have to see a sequence of present moments to have a story, a movie. And to my mind, if you went to Isaac Newton and says, here's the present moment, Newton would say, you didn't study the calculus, did you? Newton is all about how did you get from where you were to where you are at the present moment to where you're going to be in the next moment. And you know, my whole career is based on calculations of trajectories. If you've got a snapshot, you don't have the trajectory. If you want to get to a goal, you've got to think about trajectories from where you are to where you want to end up.
Yeah. In fact, you know, as calculus say, you don't have derivatives unless you have a change in X or a change in T.
Exactly. Exactly.
Now a lot of hands are up. I don't know which one went up first. So amongst the three of you, you guys can settle it, I think.
I've got a monitor that shows me who's next by the position of their screen.
Is it Kayla, Stacy, Alex? Because that's the order in which I see.
No, I see Alex, Kyla, Colin, and Stacy.
See, then, you know, it's not the same.
Yeah, I thought I was in Alex, but.
Anyway, the thing I wanted to mention was this time. Sam, you said you didn't understand why people think time doesn't matter or time doesn't exist or time isn't relevant or something to that effect. And that sort of threw me when you said that, because I know you're an intelligent person and you understand what time is, what time's relative to. each moment's relative to the next moment and the previous moment. And the gap analysis, I can stretch my moments out to cover more frames, not just one single frame of a movie. In my case, I stretch out a moment to cover 24 hours. It's like having a whole day. This is a significant step for me to be able to deal with the present moment on a much more, cohesive basis, much more constructive manner, especially when I'd have to deal with my disability. My disability involves a memory loss, a short-term memories affected by years of alcoholic overindulgence. So even though that's getting better, that's slowly improving with diet and exercise and meditation. The way I listen is also affected, and I hear people say things like that, like Sam said, leaving stuff at the door and coming in to deal with whatever's happening in the present moment, to me is just a polite way of saying, how are you going today? What's happening in your life? Have you had any brilliant discoveries or collaborations with your friends? Are you saving the world, or are you making the situation worse by not acting on these feelings and motives and trusting others? Establishing trust by meeting people is a big part of the soup, I think, and that's what I need to focus on. Over.
So thanks, Alex. Who's next?
I am. So first, I just want to say that I had to look up what gap analysis is. So if we could just be like Barry explained it, then I understood, but I was still looking it up. The other thing I wanted to say that has to do with that is that it's easier for people to make that analysis about situations that they're not directly involved in. And that's where I think the benefit of fiction comes in. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. A third unrelated thing, how many tech hours would it take for somebody to create a timer in the corner that we could just watch and people would know? You could 1 minute, 2 minute, or 3.
Just open a second window in your browser. There's a countdown clocks in your browser. You can just open a second little window. If you got
well, then maybe one of us can screen share that. We should try that experiment.
Colin would know how to screen share it. He's got that all set up.
Okay. I'm complete.
Yeah, I've actually done that before. and Yoakum had a neat little program I was tweaking to have people speaker order in their time automatically tracked.
And Heiner's had a sand timer as well. I know Heiner owns one.
Yeah, I think it's good we all consider time. Yeah.
When I move,
I don't know
when
if my parent, so
I can see a timer. When I move my mouse, a timer appears on the right-hand side at the top of the screen.
Okay, so I think it's Colin and Kayla who have their hands up right now.
Maybe I just say something about this timer, because I'm also triggered about this. You see, this is something we discussed since 5 years. We used such timers, but not only to see how the time is running, or how we now have it in political discussions, that they count who of the candidates has spoken so many minutes already. But the most important thing is not only in which sequence, but how the time is allotted or gifted or given from one person to the other, because the most precious resource is attention. And all this has been done in prototypes with me, around me for 10 years. Nobody really wants to pay it yet. But prototypes have been done. I have it on my website, and it's not really about a timer. It is individual timers and really making sure that the time can be added and moved, and that at the end, people come to a peaceful end.
Thanks, Heiner. I think it's Kayla, and then me, and then, I don't know, Colin was in there somewhere.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
Kayla,
yeah.
Colin, and Sam. And I don't know if Alex's hand is from before.
I think it's new. Okay, so
Yes.
Kayla, I think you're next.
I'm going to kind of wrangle everybody back because I'm very uncertain about what the topic is right now. And I'm also feeling like everybody's got some type of irritation going on. And I want to address that. So, number one, what is this topic about? Because if you want to talk about triggers, then I had wanted to kind of bounce about the idea of anger because I have I've been really thinking about anger. Some people think anger is destructive, and some people think it's a way to kind of push you. It's a way to empower you for something that's passionate. And there's also this notion of freedom of speech that I've been reading. You know, why are people talking about the pandemic? How come you guys keep talking about that? Why are you stopping me from talking about that? That's like a lot of this chatter that I've been reading online about freedom of speech. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is it's kind of circulating. I feel the same theme is going around here. So, if someone could tell me what the topic is, that'd be great. And if there is no topic, can we pick one? I'm complete.
Well, I can help you out there. The topic is, at the moment, it's gap analysis, but the greater topic is what Sam brought up that him and Stacy were talking about, I think, 2017, about, and Glenn too was involved in doing story fiction writing. And Sam said that as well, it's a big part of some of the courses he took on system thinking. So, you know, being able to write these fiction narratives, which segues right into what I wanted to say, that I think the milestones, and as Barry's maths, you know, doing derivatives, are needed along the way of the journey map, okay? And it would be interesting to use our narratives to interpret them through the journey map, see what's missing, what's there, because it's really just a general, temporal, iterative, simple crayon version of what I think agile would be. So, you know, we could like look at the map and try to dream our way through the map and draw more relevant things on the map and make different versions of it for each person's narrative. Yeah.
Thanks, Colin. I thought that was a pretty good attempt at trying to see where we meandered on topic. Let's see. I think it's me and then Alex, right?
And I think Kayla's right. It is a triggering thing for us because it was something that we hope would naturally happen. So there is something, I think, in listening that we have to do better. And Kayla's lack of listening is really kind of a benefit as kind of showing what we have been doing is not really listening. But she's very honest about it, and I think she's got her reasons, and that's not the same excuse we have for 5 years. And I'd like to second what Heiner was saying about us each being diligent about our own time, and I think that comes from focusing. And if we're just here in the town square, then I think we can, you know, tell lots of fish stories and go on, especially when we're meeting new people. And I like the idea if somebody has a valuable story that I know I've got, like, say, X number of minutes, I can give so many minutes to that person. So they see in their timer, it just went up, which is a vote to keep going, you see? So they're not taking anybody's time. They're not taking bandwidth. It's not, they are taking more bandwidth and it's what you would say, the desired bandwidth for them to take. So, you know, I think Heiner's been trying to say that we want to increase bandwidth for people who are actually adding value for you, right? And then, you know, I don't know, that's kind of an account wise looking at, you know, I'll give this person 3 minutes. I'm giving them another 5 minutes. And you might not end up talking at all if other people have really interesting things to say, I suppose. That's why it's good to have an after show. Anyway, thank you.
Okay. So unless someone else objects, I think I'm next. Okay. So I'll say two things. One, I was surprised that you had such a strong reaction to what I said in response to you, Stacy. Because in my mind, I was agreeing with you. And in your mind, I was disagreeing with you. So that came back as kind of a strong reaction that I still like to unpack. So if you're willing, I'd like to try an experiment that you had proposed many times ago, which is you and I can go back and view that section of this video and see where things went sideways. So I have that invitation to you, okay? The second is, one of the things Zoom does, if you have the right settings, when you record, and I've been recording these, okay, is that every participant has a separate audio file that's produced. So there's an audio file called Stacy, there's an audio file called Barry, there's an audio file called Tease, there's an audio file called Sam. And even though they extend for the entire duration of the session, the size of it roughly approximates how much each person speaks.
Ah, good.
Because when the person is silent, it's compressed, so it doesn't use up as much space. Okay? So one of the things I could do, which I have not ever done, is I could post the sizes of people's individual audio files. Now, this is not done if the recording is done on Zoom's website. Okay. Also, if Doug does it, he would have to provide that information because I don't have access to that. Okay. So only if I record it locally do those audio files get produced. So that's one way of just saying, hey, Sam produced a 90 megabyte audio file, Stacy produced a 50 megabyte audio file, Teese produced a 2 megabyte audio file, something like that. Okay. So we have, and that's of course not directly relevant to how much people spoke, but it's one indicator. Okay, just one indicator. Okay, so those are the two things I wanted to say. Stacy, I invite you to join me in viewing that little segment of today's session where I was trying to say something and then you thought you were hearing that I was disagreeing with you. Okay.
Yeah, I'll definitely do that. But my first impression is that it wasn't so much that I thought you were disagreeing with me. It's that I thought you were moving away from the conversation to mention your trigger with the whole notion of being present.
I was.
I know, and I think that was, yes. And I think the idea of going on those kind of tangents to reiterate a past trigger is also distracting sometimes.
Okay, I could see that, but I could also see that what you were doing was potentially, refocusing from my original topic. So that's what I don't understand is why was that okay? And then my riff on your thing is not okay.
Because you asked if there were any ideas. And what I did is I threw out an idea that I felt was related to that. So it had some of your intentions in it, and it was something new to throw out. It wasn't a commentary that your idea is no good. It was like, oh, here's something that's related as well. And,
right.
This is why I think it would be worthwhile to do.
Right. That's what I was trying to do exactly with you as well. I was trying to relate what you were saying to other topics that we brought up as well.
Yeah, I didn't hear that point because I was distracted by the other one, but I'll go back and look.
Okay. I will lower my hand now.
I will raise my voice about the metrics including the time spent replying, the time spent talking, the time spent with your microphone clicked on, even though there was no voice. I wonder if it measures that, if it measures the background hum of my fan, because I could leave my microphone on all the time if that's the case, and I get the highest metric for time spent listening or time spent talking. So if it's accurate enough to distinguish between background noise and our voices, that'll be great. That would be more accurate. Because
Zoom does what they do. It's up to us to misinterpret what they do.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, the algorithm's a computer machine learning language, and it can tell a human voice from a background sound.
Alex, I'm not
So,
making representations on what Zoom does. I'm just saying it
okay,
creates these artifacts, and it's up
yes,
to
I know.
us to
I know.
use it
We can
however
hear.
we do, whether we use it
What I'm
correctly or
saying is,
not.
okay, the AI is getting better, like a human ear, so it can tell if it's a
How
background
do you know
sound,
that, Alex?
because it's improving all the time. It's come a long way in 30 years.
So it's
Right.
captioning.
You know, it can use your voice now to make somebody else look like somebody else is talking with Sam's voice.
No,
These
that's not the
are,
way it works.
well, they've got
Yeah, well,
algorithms now. They've got algorithms that make a robot's face appear to be happy, sad, smiling, or frustrated, according to the conversation, according to what it's listening to. It's AI intelligence. And getting back to what I was talking about
Okay.
before with the metrics, the metrics are all sorts of things, not just
Okay.
the time spent talking in a Zoom session. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was that if our content is just words, not meaningful, it's the content and the meaning of those words and what they're focused on that's meaningful. So regardless of what language you're using, it's the artifact is the value of the artifact is the historical sense making and system thinking that comes with the meaning that's conveyed over.
Okay.
Barry,
So,
hand us up.
Barry, I know you got your hand up. I'll just throw in a 15-second interjection here. I think Kayla's onto something. I think there's a level of irritability today that I think is special.
Yeah, angst.
I was going to ask Barry a question.
Well, Barry's got his hand up first.
Let me just make a point about what Alex and Sam are talking about. Because Sam has these audio files, for free, you could feed that audio file to otter.ai and it'll make a transcript of the spoken word. Then you can take the transcript of the spoken word and count the number of words, and you can make a word cloud out of all the vocabulary terms used. Now, what Otter won't tell you is how much meaningful information is in that transcript. That would require a human. But what would be interesting is you have the length of the audio, you have the automated transcript, the count of the number of words, the word cloud, and then somebody's summary of what they got out of it. So I might listen to something for 5 minutes and write a summary that's almost as long as the 5-minute presentation. I might also listen to an hour and write a 1-paragraph summary of what I got out of it. Now, I think only a human can do that. I don't know that AIs are to the point where they can write a summary story from an oral presentation, but maybe in 5 or 10 years, that's also will become possible. This is this metric, the ratio of words uttered to meaningful information conveyed. How much did you understand? How much did you interpret? How much did you retain? How much did you learn? And how many of those words simply kind of went into, the bit bucket? I think that's important. What does the listener get out of it, if anything?
So, Colin, did you still want to ask? Yeah, did you still want to ask Barry a question?
Yeah, well, I think I can just fold it into what he was saying as a reply. I think it is very important to get the feedback. That's the number one thing. So what if this narrative that we're writing is a narrative about a group of people that got together and decided to do some talking about important things. And then they discovered that they could see themselves talking through transcripts. And so they learned that they should be more quality in their speech, or as Barry says, he's got a metric for it. But also I think the feedback is the most important. If you're not getting feedback, if people can't summarize what you said and move it forward, then it's kind of like, well, you could just map it out and say, okay, there's that thought. There's been no comments on it. So when that person brings that thought up again, you kind of know that they're beating a dead horse. No one's giving them feedback on that. So it's there's ways that you can move ideas as well as the quality of what somebody's translating in and say repeating information. So new ideas versus, you know, background information. So I see two different kinds, and it takes time for background information. So you could, what I'm saying is, in this story, if we could find out ways that we could key actions that, well, instead of me telling it, why don't you go read the guidelines for the group? Well, we don't have guidelines for the group, right? Official guidelines, but, you know, we could say, well, that's a deficiency. We should have that then. Just a simple 5-set rule where open group, talk about most anything, you know, as long as you're respectful, join in. Something simple like that. I don't know. So people don't have to wonder. And we've talked about this many times, so I won't talk too much, but maybe the story that we're writing is kind of meta of what we're actually doing. And the win is we could start watching our time, and we could start thinking about getting feedback for what we're saying, and, you know, asking each other questions as opposed to just throwing stuff into the ether. So my question for Barry was, like, if we put, like, say, it's not an intentional community, because the premise would be, you know, written in stone for the most part. But if it's not intentional, then it's dynamic presence. Dynamic ideas that we're sharing. So each person might have a few of their own premises. And so when somebody starts doing their hobby horse, it kind of gets noted towards their hobby horse, not just that they're speaking, but they're actually speaking about their hobby horse. And if we could be conscious of that, it's almost like we could put an overlay on the windows where the person's 5 favorite topics are at the top, and people could actually ask you about your 5 favorite topics and how it's moving forward. So I think that's called focus, right? Focus on the premises. I think the premise kind of shifted around a bit, and Kayla was saying, I'm not even sure where the premise box is right now. So if there was just a timer, a premise, and I think that would go, and a place for feedback. And, you know, Sam's been asking for that for years with these Google documents and whatnot. So if we want to be serious, then it takes effort. And if we want to just meet and greet, then, you know, we could be more casual. I think there could be a flow to that. So I think it's making that clear, where you want people's effort and where you just want to be casual, right? And so, yeah, dynamic premise and timers and feedback.
Okay, so again, let me invoke the anything we're doing, I can do meta. Okay, we are trying on the face of it here in barn raising to try and figure out what we agree on and what we want to co-create together. I think that's the ostensible premise that we each come with, okay? Whether it's strong or weak. What happens in my interpretation of these conversations is we then are sensitive. I think each of us is building an awareness. I'm talking about myself, but I do think it's happening in most, of what keeps us from reaching that consensus or co-creating that plan. Is it that I'm triggered? Is it that we disagree? Is it that we misunderstand? Is it that, you know, somebody's got a hobby horse and I tune out? Is it that, you know, we just have opposing values? Is it that we just don't believe in someone else's rationale? You know, whatever the heck it is. I think that there's a kind of a meta interaction there about what prevents these collaborations from really coagulating out of these conversations and then having a life of its own. To me, those are all questions in collaborology. Those are all questions of why is it that we don't get anything done? That's the typical criticism. And I think over several years, one focusing idea has been focus. If we can't focus, we can't seem to agree, we can't seem to get anything done, we can't, you know, build upon any agreements if we don't have simple agreements. Anytime we think we're failing in building something more, like a charter, It's because I think there are these root foundational problems like making simple agreements, having common understanding around terms, having the ability to listen, having the ability to, put ideas together. Those are the things that are keeping us from doing more. Those are why I call this not just barn raising, but also foundation laying. To me, that's foundation laying. If we don't have those foundations, we can't do anything more, quote unquote. And part of that foundation laying is really looking at those bricks that ought to be there and those bricks or platform that ought not be there. And that's, Stacy, why I bring up these things which in my mind detract from building. Okay? And by that, I mean specifically these practices that I don't understand. Okay? And that's why I bring them up. These aspects of, time doesn't exist for me, or leave everything at the door. Those kind of things just don't look like buildable bricks to me. Or if they really are, no one's explained it to me. That's the thing I'm asking for. Because I know that those words are used billions of times on the internet by people who seem to understand what they mean. But if you ask more questions about what exactly they mean, they don't go very far. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for some substance underneath those words. Because if there isn't substance, it's not a brick I want to build with. Now, if brick is triggering, use a different word, okay? So anyway, that's why I'm trying to figure out what are the foundations upon which we can build bigger collaboration, co-creation, coexistence, co-visioning, sense-making. That's the set of questions that's always top of mind for me. That's why when I come to these things, it's always with extreme focus. It's not apparent to everybody. In fact, it's probably not apparent to most. But to me, it's always very clear. So when I hear people say, oh, we're not doing anything, or we're not having focus, or we're not accomplishing very much, it's because I haven't adequately told the story of what's in my mind so that the rest of you understand it. You don't have to understand it. You can have a completely different story. But to say that no one has focus, I think is erroneous, because I at least do. Over.
Sam's Club.
Not my club. I'm just a participant, just like everybody else here.
You could have created Sam's Club, and we would sign up to Sam's Club.
Oh, you would sign up? All right, I'll create it.
I probably would sign up to Sam's Club because I understand where you're going, but I'm not sure that anybody else here would necessarily have.
That's the first time anybody's ever said that to me in barn raising or GCC. First time in 4 years anybody's ever said that to me.
I don't think that's true.
Sign up to Sam's Club.
Actually, no. Tammy said that to me one time.
See where he's going. I think he means that you see where he's going.
Yes.
I've said that before too.
Okay, thanks.
That's why I'm here. Yeah, I've said that many times. Maybe not in the way that you could hear it. But yeah, I've said like I'm aligned with where Sam's going, coexistence, and is the key. How do we achieve it? So that's, I guess.
Sorry to slight you, Colin. I wasn't intending to do that. I was just trying to say those very words had never been spoken in that sequence to me before. Literally.
Well, give you tingles then. That feels good. Yeah, it's nice. So I guess it comes down to the fundamentals, right?
Well,
I guess that's what.
Actually, Stacy has her hand up, so I don't know who's next.
That's okay. I'm good. I'll put it down.
Yeah, well, no, I'll just be quick because I already said it all. But when you're saying what's missing, like if you think the fundamental cells of what's actually happening, if that's rotten, then the whole thing's going to be rotten from the bottom up. So those cells, I think, are the agile process, which is a premise, way to track your time, and a way to get feedback. And the magic that goes in there is effort. And if that effort has to be quality effort too, but people start with a white belt and they work their way up. So more is expected with those with more knowledge. But in essence, it's that kernel working over and over again. And if you can find a way to attach that to collaborology, then you've got an ecosystem. And I think that's what is intended. But without having a few self-discipline tools, which I think are a timer, and watching what the premise is. So if Kayla come over to the screen, she would see what the premise is, right? And gap analysis. She could even look it up, right? I think that would go a long way to keep us focused. If we actually had a piece of paper in front of us and we wrote down in front of us what the premise was, and then when the next premise comes, we cross that out and mark in the next premise, just on a piece of paper in front of us. That's what Heiner was saying. There's been many prototypes. It's not the prototypes that matter. It's the people practicing the fundamentals. Like they teach people to type in Africa with paper keyboards, right? That's how people learn. Some people without the equipment, they learn to type by just having paper keyboards in front of them. They learn to type. Unbelievable, eh? Anyway, I'm done. Thanks.
I think it was Stacy, then me, then Alex.
No, I have nothing.
Okay.
I've got my coffee here now, so I'm happy. But I was thinking about the time we've spent discussing this very subject, 3 or 4 years, I think it was. I'm putting this up in the comments. I don't know if people are noticing, but I've got a picture of Sam and Gertrude and Harry Vandervolt at Links Plus on the main page, in case none of you have seen it. These links that link across the international world of the internet, digital data, are links that the search engines find with their bots. They got spiders that go out and look at all the keywords and all the web pages on the internet. Over.
Thanks, Alex. One of the things I think I really miss in these Zoom meetings is not having a whiteboard that we can each share. My most effective collaborations, I realize, are when I'm talking to somebody and we're actually able to stand in front of a whiteboard and both write and both draw on it. That's very effective. Because when somebody writes something, I can draw an arrow and connect that with something that I'm drawing, or I can actually add thoughts or words to what they had written. You know, we can co-create very, very effectively using a shared whiteboard. That's hard to do using a mouse and whatever electronic whiteboard there is, whether it's Zoom or whether it's Teams or whether it's something else. Really difficult. It doesn't happen at the speed of collaboration when you actually get in a room together. So I think for me, that has contributed to the lack of artifacts produced out of these meetings. I'd love to have more diagrams, because when I get together with somebody on a topic in front of a whiteboard, diagrams just flow out of those conversations. That's what I miss not having online. Over.
That's probably what my maps are, really. They're more of just whiteboards than anything else.
Share screen has a whiteboard option.
I know.
Share screen basic has whiteboard as one of the options. And some other options under advanced.
You know, I think for me to use it effectively, rather than a mouse, I'd rather have a pen with some kind of a tablet. Because for me, trying to draw with a mouse, that's a non-starter for me.
Yeah, you need a screen where you have a touch screen. Yeah.
Or at least, you know, a stylus on a tablet that you can actually use like a mouse.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I got as well. But I can't draw in my mapping things. All I do is take notes and links and screen capture. So if I wanted something drawn, I'd get a screen capture of it, put it in a box.
Stacy?
The challenge that, the challenge that I've always had here and continue to have is that I'm never really quite sure of what it is we're trying to co-create. And sometimes I think I know, and I think it's more than one thing, which works for me because I believe those things all go together. And I think that there's room for me to tap into the points that, you know, I have something to offer, and just, you know, observe the things that where I don't have something to offer. But one of the things I think when I get triggered sometimes is I get disappointed because there's a part of me that has an expectation that we're actually going to physically do something together. And that doesn't seem to happen. And so I think I get disappointed, and that appears as, you know, frustration or anger or any of those things.
And half of the group, which is Sunday, is explicitly not trying to do something, which is very confusing. So I think the Sunday show is more of an interpersonal thing, where Saturday is more of a collaborative thing. So I don't know. That might make more sense of it, but it is a bit. And there's room for other people to actually hit the, you know, make a show button. And you, instead of trying to squish something into barn raising, you might see if you can get 4 or 5 of the interested barn raising people.
Well, Alex has done it.
Shows. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't been able to do that.
Yeah, well, it just takes buy-in from people interested. You know, there's apps out there made for this kind of stuff too. Zoom's one of them.
I just want to insert one thing in regards to what Colin said about Sunday, because I disagree. Sunday is trying to do a little something, but it's different. I think what Sunday's trying to do is learn and demonstrate new ways to build trust in groups and to self-regulate the communication in those groups. So I wouldn't say that it's not doing anything.
Yes, the trust comes up a lot, and there's 2 positions with trust. Either you start with trust or you begin without trust and build up to it. So the Sunday show's like starting with trust, I think. To a certain degree, it's like it's a place where the people are invited to join in without having to establish trust. It's as if the trust already exists, and you're moving into a conversation there where you can be open about things that you would normally not be open to with people you believed you couldn't trust. So that's one aspect of it.
Sam?
Well, I feel like I've spoken a lot, but I also have a response to that. I have a very different notion of trust than I think most people do. To me, trust is not just about 2 people trusting each other, okay? I think that's a simplified and indeed dangerous notion of trust. It conveys a should implied in there. And when that trust then doesn't live to one of those people's expectations, one thinks the trust is lost. If trust is immediately granted without concern for what it is that you're trusting that person for, it's guaranteed to disappoint at some point. And I've told this before, if I trust that my daughter can actually make dinner, I have complete trust in her to do so. Do I trust her to fly a plane? No. So I and my daughter have trust. I convey that trust on my daughter around a specific responsibility or deliverable or skill. And to not be specific and just say, I trust blah, okay, is dangerous. It's setting up that other person to disappoint you, and it's setting you up to, convey a should on that other person. You should have been able to do this. I trusted you to do that, without being clear. And that to me is irresponsible. So I have a very different notion of trust than I believe most people do from the use of that word that I hear, okay? I would much rather say trust is at least a 3-part item. A trusts B to do C. And if you leave C out and just say A trusts B completely or in blanket form, I would never do that to somebody. Over.
I just put in the chat for me, trust is the degree to which what you expect will happen. And when I evaluate trust, I'm looking at the skill of the person, but I'm also looking at the way I think they will approach whatever that task is, you know, who they are internally.
Yeah, so just a quick rejoinder on that one. When I hear someone say, though, I trust X person, okay, they don't typically add to do what as part of that statement. That's what confuses me, okay? If I say, I trust you, Stacy, and I leave it at that, boy, you know, what are the set of expectations I'm conveying on you? What am I expecting you to do? How do you even know? Why would I do that to you?
Yeah, when I hear that, and then I'll let Barry go, I just, if I say I trust somebody, what I mean by that is I trust them to not talk about me behind my back, to tell me their true feelings, and to answer me honestly.
I'm glad you explained that, because that didn't necessarily pop up in my mind when the word trust comes up.
Yeah. I
mean, to some people, it could be, I trust that that person is not going to take that pile of bills that's on my desk. You know?
That's why we have to ask more. We have to ask more questions. But we're cutting Barry off.
Exactly. Very.
Yeah, I'd also extend trust not just to an individual to do a specific task, but trust in some kind of a system that one's embedded in. So do you trust the government to do a good job of governing the country? Or do you trust the democratic process to work as advertised? So you have trust in abstract systems or complex systems, which are not the responsibility of any one individual. And when Kayla talked about kind of feelings of anxiety or angst or whatever this zeitgeist is, I think a lot of that is going around these days because our embedded systems, our supply chain systems are failing. You know, our medical systems are failing. We have big embedded systems which have worked, you know, reliably for years, and suddenly they're breaking down. And so when you lose faith in the system, you have this sort of general rise in anxiety and angst and worry and distress. I think all of us are experiencing sort of this general rise in uncertainty about the future. Are we going to solve the problems that are facing in the 21st century, or are we going to leave the world in a terrible state to our children and grandchildren?
Alex?
I'm thinking about the supply chain issue and seeing all the ships that haven't docked in the port, and that seems to be an issue related to logistics coming from the higher authority, the logistical higher authority who controls the distribution of goods and services in the ports. So what's happening? Are the truck drivers on strike? I don't know. That could be contributing to the issue, but this delivering goods to shops and offices and factories and hospitals and police stations is not a problem. So how come supermarkets are running out of nappies? Over.
I'm going to withdraw my hand. I'm going to do it later. Stacy?
I'm just breathing.
Trust
I'm glad you're breathing. We should each stop and do that a little bit every day.
Yeah, I think we should all do it together right now. Yeah, I get very frustrated when we go off into a lot of different directions. I almost imagine what would be beautiful on that whiteboard you were talking about, to like have to move the pencil from the dot we're all standing on to where we're going. And if it's, you know, if you can't connect it, then you got to save it for someone else, or you got to just throw it up there and get to it later.
Well, you know, some groups allow a moderator to take that responsibility.
True.
I'm feeling that after 4 years, I've reached the end of my effectiveness in these Zoom conversations. I think I really need better tools. I really do miss a whiteboard. I really do miss creating notes that we can each review and agree on. I've tried for 4 years to create notes, and I see very little follow-up from most people on these notes. And yet I still believe they're valuable. Colin's really the only one that's done anything with the transcripts, really. And look at, you know, what impact that has when we can actually do some experimental searches. And focusing and agreements around moderation and focusing on topics, preparing topics for conversation, tracking them from week to week or from month to month or even year to year, we miss that. Each of us, you know, has collected notes on these things, and I've tried to bring back some of them, and some of that is viewed as, oh, why are we doing this again? Even today. One of the things I didn't bring up was, you know, when I brought that up, Josh said, are we becoming BuzzFeed? If so, I'm going to leave. And I said something like, Josh, you're welcome to leave anytime. And he immediately left without even hearing the rest of the conversation. So did I piss him off? Did I go too far? I'm really open to that. If you guys are.
We don't know. Did he leave because it is BuzzFeed? We're meandering in a BuzzFeed mode? Or did he leave because he got
right? And I don't even know what BuzzFeed is and, you know, what it's really trying to do.
And I don't think, I don't think that when he was saying BuzzFeed, he was talking about the idea that we were meandering. I had heard something about sensationalizing and algorithms. That's what I think he objected to, which I would object to that as well.
Right, but I think. But
yeah, that's a different issue.
Right.
But yes, I do think that my guess would be that you're well, you could leave any time probably triggered him into leaving, but that's not to say that you were wrong to say that. You know, the truth is we all could leave any time, and
that's right.
You know, we either stand our ground and fight for it or we walk away, but then you don't have to announce, you know, whatever. And he didn't announce it. He just left. You guys didn't notice it immediately. Yeah. So I don't think
I did notice
wrong on that. Well, I don't think anybody's in the wrong on that. Let me just put it that way.
That gets back to what Kayla said about being triggered and the connection to anger, because the Facebook algorithms, which, you know, came to light a week or two ago, is that anger was a single emotion that generated engagement, retention of engagement. And so the notion that anger is the driving emotion to engagement, and it's driving people to distraction. I think that's a really important observation, discovery, and insight, and something that once we're aware of that, we can maybe start to think about better ways to manage engagement, manage triggering, and be aware of and sensitive to the role of anger, which is to say emotional distress, as part of the zeitgeist that we're feeding. We're feeding that wolf of distress, anger, triggering, and not understanding the dynamics by which that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Just a follow up on that, I think it was probably more than just recently. I mean, Social Dilemma did a very good job making that point, and that was made quite a while ago.
Yeah, I guess the thing about Frances Haugen is that it proved that the people inside of Facebook had modeled it to a T. They didn't just have a sort of
and understood the implications and chose the direction to profit.
Exactly. they knew it. See, we may not realize, you know, the dynamics. They knew the mathematics of the dynamics.
Yeah, it's like the cigarette industry knowing about cancer, right?
Right. Right. Cancer.
Alex, you have your hand up?
Well, if we're not discussing the issue, we're not going to get to any solution or possible solution. So I think if we can invite Joshua to add his contribution to this topic, it would be great. Maybe we have to do that at Clubhouse. I don't know. Over.
He was saying, I think Sam, you know, might have triggered him, but he didn't leave until Alex repeated the act again of trying to sensationalize and put it out. And I think as soon as Alex started talking about the same thing again, I think that's when he left. I'm not sure. You'd have to ask him, but that's the way.
Cause and effect is hard to estimate with one data point.
Yeah, it is. We've made that mistake many a time, but you know, how could we have treated, you know, maybe have been more compassionate towards Josh, because he is a little rough around the edges. He doesn't mean to insult. I don't think he's trying to make a point. I don't know. I guess a mood indicator would be good too. When somebody comes in a bad mood, it'd be nice if we could be honest about our emotions. And, you know, I think Barry's made that very clear, that emotions, and, you know, I've come to learn that stories are the top tier of everything, because we're tribal. What triggers us, what makes us happy, and what we think is better.
I put your screen on to pin so that it showed up the full screen, and I could see Colin's map. And some of those things on Colin's map reminded me of what triggered Josh. Perhaps he was thinking we were talking about introducing this algorithm to sensationalize the GCC, but that's not. We were talking about it because of the suicide attempts and the bullshit coming from Facebook with their algorithm designed to increase participation amongst teenagers and vulnerable people who are what the market is looking for. So it's about money.
It's about money having means more time to be understood and be clear.
When money, you know, means
shown
more
that
than
3
people,
times today, right?
When
like
money means more than people's lives, that's an issue, isn't it? What's more important?
That's diving into that topic again.
And now we have 2 people talking at the same time.
Yeah, that's because I'm trying to finish and Colin's interrupting me. But if it's corporate shareholding is more valuable than the people in the community, your neighbours' children's lives, that's a sick society that needs to be changed. Over.
Yeah, there's lots of problems indeed.
Stacy's got her hand up.
But again, I'm just saying we'd have to ask Josh, because I brought it up. I didn't mean to implicate to you, Alex, that you were what triggered him. Just the topic of sensationalizing and becoming BuzzFeed, you know, and I think not being respected and then hearing it again, I think it just all balled up and I got something better to do. That's all.
Stacy's got her hand up.
So anger, in the way we've been talking about, does 2 things. One, it gives you that motivation like Kayla was talking about. And in social media, what it does is it connects you to other people. So 2 things are happening, because you're feeling a pull, you know, motivation, but you're also feeling connection. And I contend that if we were able to, that we could catalyze that connection to be just as powerful as you see with anger. But the problem is the people who can control that have no vested interest in seeing us get together. So if the game is to, you know, if they want, if we are divided, we're not as powerful than if we're united. But the people that are making money off of us being divided. And I'll stop there. I don't know if I was clear or not, but I will just say, if you think back to any time you've ever been part of any kind of movement, there might have been a little bit of an anger in there, but also there was this great feeling of being connected and feeling valuable and useful, and there's a purpose. Barry?
You know, people who follow me on Facebook know that from time to time I do word of the day. And last week, 2 of my correspondents bested me with the word of the day that I had not heard this word before. And it's relevant to the issue that Sam and others have brought up about kind of spinning our wheels and trying to make progress and feeling like we're not actually getting anywhere. This word of the day comes from two of my correspondents. The word is spuddle, S-P-U-D-D-L-E. It's like puddle with the letter S in front of it. Spuddle, a useful verb from the 17th century that means to work feebly and ineffectively because your mind is elsewhere or you haven't quite woken up yet. To be extremely busy whilst achieving absolutely nothing. I think spuddle kind of captures the zeitgeist, not just here in GCC, because there's a reason that my friends brought that word up. I think our whole culture is in sort of a state of spuddle, where we're spinning our wheels and we are distracted and we're not accomplishing anything constructive. We're just, spinning our wheels.
Sisyphusian?
What's the word?
Sisyphusian?
Yeah.
Oh, like Sisyphus?
Sisyphus. Yeah. That's a more, actually not modern word because it comes from Greek mythology, but spuddle. We're distracted by other things. And as a result, we're not focused on what we're supposed to be doing right now. And so what we're doing right now is just kind of meandering and not making any net progress on a daily basis.
Okay. No hands are up, so I'll speak. I really do think I've done a bad job focusing us, okay? Because I do encourage people to bring their project or hobby horse or favorite topic or whatever, so that we can examine what happens when we don't accrete around them, so that we don't actually coagulate around them. Those, to me, are things we need to understand before we get collectively intelligent. And so the fact that they're not happening, to me, is not the concern I have, but it clearly is a concern for the rest of you here. For me, it's, can we tease it apart to understand, was it unclear? Was it not workable? Was it too egotistic? Was it too triggering? What is it that's keeping us from pairwise and then growing these collaborations? So that's why I do think that these are productive, because it helps me, at least, if not anybody else. It helps me understand those blocking issues. And that, to me, is necessary if we're going to ever become collectively intelligent. Because we've been collectively intelligent for hundreds, maybe even thousands of years, under old models of, I tell you what to do, I pay you, therefore we're collaborating.
Have we been collectively intelligent?
Oh yeah, look at armies. They can argue that they're very effective at scale. But it's a very different kind of collective intelligence than the kind that we seem to want to see in the future.
I'm misunderstanding what's even meant by collective intelligence, because I'm thinking, do I know what a person of color is feeling, or somebody who's oppressed? I thought that was part of collective intelligence too.
Yeah, there's different notions of what it means to be collectively intelligent. I've given my definition, okay? And if you want, I can repeat it again here, yes, very please. Briefly. It's if you get one or a small number of people trying to do something, okay, to some level of quality. If we can add one or more other people to that and guarantee that we know how to make that end result better, then we are collectively intelligent. If we do not, and we run the risk that adding more people to a team creates in a worse outcome, then we do not understand collective intelligence. That's my test for collective intelligence. And that could start with one. If I am trying to do something and I add a collaborator, okay, whether it's you, Stacy, or Barry, or Colin, or anybody else, and we go nowhere, okay, then that proves we don't understand how to be collectively intelligent. That's my litmus test for collective intelligence. Now, it doesn't have to improve, but it just cannot degrade. It's got to be at least as good or better than that original one or small number or large number. That's my test.
Yeah, there's that famous observation, I forget who it's named after. If you add more people to a project, it slows down the project.
That in software was the Mythical Man Month, Fred Brooks.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the typical, 9 people to make a baby in 1 month argument.
I think you could name yours, Sam. Never too many cooks in the kitchen.
Right. It's the old factory model gone wrong, It's just looking at efficiencies without looking at the interdependencies.
Yeah. See, in a real assembly line, each station has one specialty that one person does.
And they have a quality gate.
Yes. Yes.
Alex.
If I go to a party where there's nine of my old girlfriends, in 9 months I can have 9 babies.
So are you collectively intelligent there, Alex?
There was a movie. What was it called?
And what's the metric? What's the outcome?
Sounds like Idiocracy.
And clearly it depends on how you decide to measure the outcome, right? Because in that case, okay, I could measure it based on number of healthy cells that are, splitting, in which case that'd be fabulous, right? But if I'm measuring the outcome on the quality of sleep I get, that may not be, okay? So you have to look at what metrics and what outcome you're actually trying to achieve, and then apply the collective intelligence to that set of metrics or outcomes. Alex
would have to be wearing the right kind of clothing for that party. It would have to be a paternity suit. Stacy got it.
I'm a punny girl.
A lawyer joke.
So I don't know if I've done a good job just clarifying what I think is of value here in barn raising. It's not that we're individually either doing or not doing, okay? I think we're each doing our lives very effectively, in most cases, okay? What I'm trying to figure out is, can we share ideas so that the ideas we bring to each other have an opportunity to co-create better ideas? And in order for that to happen, we need to understand what's keeping that from happening. See, that to me is the true unblocking here in barn raising.
I would nominate distraction as what's keeping it from happening.
Yes, the flip side of which I think is focus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Part of what's stopping it from happening is the way we undervalue some people's contributions. For example, Collins Maps, they offer a huge insight into the development of what people bring and the way the events are unfolding over time. They give us a window into what's happening, really. So we undervalue these maps that Collins producing. I think that's something I'd like to see addressed.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Alex. They're mostly transitional, though, is the point. They're not the final artifact. I see my maps as a way to like Sam's saying, put it on a whiteboard. And you got to have focus and you got to have attention. And that takes effort.
And those are scarce resources.
Let me do an experiment. Does anyone here, and I'd love to ask this of everyone, okay, who participates, does anyone here really feel that they're appreciated?
Sometimes.
And heard?
Sometimes.
Certainly not all the time. Sometimes.
I can say things that are way off the subject and not get banned or barred. So that's a value that you don't get that at many places over.
I'm glad as many hands went up as did. I had actually expected fewer hands.
Well, the ones who don't left, I guess.
It's true.
I'll say one thing. I'm appreciated where I'm doing a specialty that's rare. Like at the fix-it shop at the community center, when people have an appliance that just doesn't work and nobody can fix it. If somebody like me does a fix-it job that's rare, I get appreciated for that. But for doing something routine, anybody could have done that.
They're both important, though.
I actually appreciate myself for doing the dishes every day. Because I know what the house would look like if I didn't.
One thing I remember Sam said is that when he closes the cupboard door, he tries to do it so it makes no noise.
Yeah, thanks for remembering that.
Yeah, well, I remember that because I attempt to close things gently too, but I notice how loud it is.
Especially, you know, dishes when they clash against each other.
Yeah.
You can put the little rubber pads on the cupboards with double-sided tape.
Yeah, but can you put those pads on dishes so that when you lay one dish down on a pile of dishes, it makes no noise? I still can't do it. I can minimize it, but it still makes noise.
Yeah,
they're perfect resonators, aren't they?
You need background music to cover the noise. So, but Barry's point is something Barry said triggered me, and it was the fact that museums are the public servants. The government is sacking people from museums in large numbers. Something like 15% of all the staff across the United States museums have suddenly been, sorry, there's no work for you today. But Barry's a volunteer at his museum in Boston. So he can't be sacked because he's a volunteer. So he's safe. His job's secure.
Yeah.
Hopefully, unless the people who run the museum in his position in there are sacked.
Although the community centers and museums were closed for 16 months for lockdown, so that suddenly had a big suspension that lasted well over a year.
I wonder if that gave them more time to do maintenance, or they piled up the dishes.
I want to go back. I want to go back to what Alex said about undervaluing people's ideas. And I've brought up this as an activity once before. If we could each, there's this show Chopped, where everybody gets the same ingredients and they have to prepare a dish. They could use any amount of any ingredient that they want to use. It would be interesting to be able to go around to every participant, each one of us individually, and name one thing we got from each person. It's going to be different, and that's a good thing, because the same things are not needed in the same proportion everywhere.
And also what the person would have liked you to recognize, like not what you did get, but their feedback of what they were trying to tell you, because it's not always the same thing.
But I'm going to disagree with you, Colin, because that's a nice thing if that's what the person wanted to give you. But that goes back to the whole idea of being given a sandwich when you're not hungry. So we already have tried, but we've already, we're very patient with each other. We listen to each other. I'm moving away from that because at this point, I think it's a block. And I'm saying we should be allowed to, we know everybody. We know what everybody has to offer to a degree. If I want that, I'll go and ask you for that. I've gotten something from each one of you. It should be up to me what I use.
I'm talking more preliminary than actually trying to get something. Like, that's down the road. That's stage 2 in my journey map. Stage 1 is just, like you say, get to know each other. So if you say something, hey, how are you? What I heard you say was this. And they say, oh, that's nice. But you must have misheard. Like Kayla was distracted. What I was really trying to say was also this. So you don't miss what they were trying to say.
But if I missed it, maybe it wasn't meant for me.
Well, that's a preliminary type of conversation, yes.
Sam?
Okay, so I'm going to check out with this next statement, okay? And that is that when I ask that question, everybody, feel that you've been heard or appreciated. I actually believe that I would love to bring probably 6 or 7 other really big topics to GCC that have really been holding back on, even after 4 years. So there's a number of topics which I feel have been raised in the last 4 years. There's a large backlog of topics that have not yet brought up, simply because we haven't gotten past the foundational stage. We barely even know how to mix the concrete. We haven't even started pouring the concrete yet. So that, to me, is my response to that very same question. The next thing I'll bring up is something that happened this week. It used to be the case that some machine learning machine called GPT-3 used to be the biggest and most sensational learning on the internet. But now Microsoft, just this past week, has tripled the number of parameters they've put into this learning model. I don't exactly remember what they called it. I don't think it's called GPT-4 because it's being done by Microsoft, and GPT's been doing, I think, by OpenAI. But I still, every time I hear one of those announcements, I hear that eventually the hybrid approach is going to rear its head again. You know, there's no substitute for knowledge. You got lots of data. And yes, you can do all kinds of fancy analysis on data and come up with some interesting insights. But the higher level of abstraction you go, the more insightful the knowledge/wisdom. And if you've got that, you need to be able to find a way to work that into the reasoning machine or the learning machine. Because to expect a learning machine to only go from data and create everything that humans know from scratch, I think it's not necessary. And it's quite costly. And besides, we have some knowledge. Why not start with that knowledge and add that and augment that to our machine learning algorithms? So I think a hybrid approach will eventually be something that comes out. But right now, there's just such we're on this place where we put machine learning on this pedestal, you know, because it's starting to show results that we did not think were possible even 5-10 years ago. Like you can tell a machine to, you know, create code for you or write a web page for you, okay? Now that's a very specialized kind of thing, but it can actually do that after a fashion, okay? Not great, not super complex, but it can do that starting to. And if you add more knowledge, that could just increase just tremendous fold. So I do think that eventually it's going to get there, but right now all the attention and all the hoopla is all around these, you know, neural net techniques. And I still think that's going to be in its own box, and it's going to be a while before knowledge, quote unquote, which is from actual humans that have actually known the domain for quite a while, can actually augment these learning models. So I'm looking forward to those days. On the other hand, they might be threatening to some people. So
I just have one question of you, Sam, before you leave. And after that's accomplished, like what's the end goal for you?
For me?
like what if all this were to happen that you're hoping will happen, then what?
Better self-driving cars, for example, you know, better ways of creating designs. Have you guys actually seen these designs, structural designs that have been created by these machine learning models that are different from the rectilinear 90-degree joints and seams and whatever? They actually take some very interesting shapes, and there's some very interesting whole spaces that are taken out because they're not necessary, because they're not stress bearing, and they take very unusual shapes. So if we could do that sort of thing and create better buildings or better transportation or better vaccines or better self-driving cars, that's what I think can actually help. But on the other hand, okay, we haven't yet applied it to how do we do food distribution? How do we do it to, you know, restore forests? You know, how do we do it to clean our water? We really need to do that, in my view, because those machines can help us do those things.
Does your dog want to?
Did that answer your question, Stacey?
Yeah, it does. And what saddens me, and I'm not putting this on you, there was nothing in there about then we'll have happier people. Then we'll have more well-adjusted.
No. I didn't say it. But why would I need to say it if the implication is obvious?
It's not obvious. It's not obvious. That's why. It's not. And I'm not picking on you. I'm just saying in general. So that then when you make, you know, when you switch over to like food production, no, that's secondary because we put people even below that. It just feels very. No,
it feels like you've made a number of assumptions which are unfair given what I've said. And I think that's the second time that's happened today.
But I keep saying this has nothing to do with you. I'm talking in general. If the bulk of the time, not just you in life, is figuring out how to make machine learning better, but less thought is going into what's happening that's not making people better, we're missing something. There's something. See, it's hard for me to talk in this space because I think you very accurately said what the direction here is. You know, and I respect that. And like I said, I still feel valued and I still want to come. But the main goal is not towards people. Whereas in some of the other groups, like let's say in Sunday, to me, it's more clear this is about people. Because, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I will respond to that. To me, it's not about people. To me, it's about the planet. People? The planet is more than just human-centric.
Okay.
And we have too much a human-centric view. And that's what's caused us a lot of problems. So when I'm talking about deforestation, I'm talking about cleaner water, cleaner air, that's more than just humans. That's for the planet.
But there are ways, excuse me for 1 second, Alex.
My comment will address what you're talking about.
Now Stacey's field shut down, Alex.
Yeah, well, she shut down because I shut her down, because she wasn't raising her hand. She wasn't following the protocol. And the answer I wanted to give while she did that was specific to what she was talking about, understanding and clarity. The machine language doesn't understand what a human can understand. Look at this pencil. This pencil I'm holding up can be broken easy if I bend it like that with two hands. But if I put 6 pencils together in a bunch, I can't break it, as hard as I try. If there's 10 pencils, it's very difficult even for a strong man to break. So unity is strength. And that example of the pencils demonstrates very clearly that unity is strength. It makes that obvious to a human being, and even a machine can basically understand, if it's designing architecture in an organic fashion, that unity is strength. If there's more ribs, something's going to be stronger. Over.
Sam, the point that I wanted to make is that there are places where people and planet collide, and if we could start at that point. For example, I think most of us believe that children that are more in touch with nature will be more emotionally healthy. So if we combine the well-being of the human with the well-being of the planet, and we look for more places where things combine, that's what I'm pushing towards, as opposed to doing things in separate tracks.
Yeah, I hear you, and I agree with you, but I think that's quite a ways from the specific question you asked me and the answer that I gave to you. The answer that I gave to you didn't negate what you just said. It's a different point, but you still got disappointed.
Well, so when I come to this space, and I've tried many times, and we've done a few participatory things in this group that I think always went well. I'm always trying to bring that kind of participation energy to this, because I think it's a way that we deal with human implications at the same time as working on these more mechanical tasks. I'd like to see it combined in the process as well, because we have to practice that. Like, one of the things that I've been talking about a lot, I always talk about play, and we learn to play when we're small, and we learn to play in different ways. Some of us play with dolls, some of us play with blocks, some of us play group games, some of us play individual games, but there are values and there are lessons in all of those kinds of games. So we might have grown up playing Monopoly, but we got to change that mindset, because the whole game was designed without taking everything into consideration. So even when we're working together, if we can kind of thread in some of the things that we know are missing in lives of individuals and have that built into a work process, I think it would be more productive, and I think there'd be more engagement. Sam?
Okay, so thank you for explaining that. I think I do understand that.
Thank
but
you.
The way the topic was broached, in a way, you did to me what I did to you, right? When I responded to you, I said, I'm triggered, right? What you just did to me after I answered your question was, I'm saddened. Right?
I am.
So, let me finish, please.
Okay. And I just want to apologize in advance and say sometimes I can't always articulate what I'm thinking in the best way.
I get it. Neither can I. Okay. English is my second language. Okay. So, on the other hand, if you say you're saddened by something I did not do, I hear an expectation in there. You had an expectation of me, and I did not meet that expectation, and that's why you're sad.
No.
And I think that's what?
You're personalizing it. And
yes, I am, because it was in response to something I just said. That
I've heard from many people. So I wasn't just talking about you.
If you're not depressed, you're not paying attention.
Okay, I'll just leave it there. Okay, it's 10:10. I'm going to stop the recording. I'm going to start another recording. I'm going to make one of you host. That way you guys can go on for another 4 hours if you like. Okay. Stop.